Sure.
Hey man, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Dude, I just love your stuff and and if you want to tell me how you got started because you've been doing this for a while, haven't you?
In one form or another, yeah. So like in 2009, I started a podcast with like a 3 pack of Turtle Beach headset microphones. So that obviously sounded like dog shit. So over the years, it just sort of morphed into greater and greater gear until like YouTube popped, and I was and still am a fan of like terrestrial talk radio because it's engaging, and I guess I always like that about the podcast. But here on YouTube, I found that it's the same thing. I'm doing the same thing, except now there's a camera on me, and I do a lot less editing. So the experience has been sort of streamlined over the years.
Yeah, the whole radio thing, that's like the Art Bell stuff. Like yeah, do you remember the old Art Bell stuff?
Art Bell, yeah, yeah, yeah. So my like growing up, my it's lame, but the reason this got sparked was like Rick Dees. Are you familiar with Rick Dees?
You're gonna have to remind me. I
He's not either in either of our age demographics, but he was a DJ like in the 70s. His Have you heard of the song The Disco Duck?
Yep.
Yeah. So
Okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
that's Rick Dees. And so every day driving to school on terrestrial radio in the morning, Rick Dees would be syndicated. And so I would listen to his corny bullshit on the way to school. And so I fell in love with stupid sound drops and like audio gags and like fake commercials and shit. So I just decided to do that. And like on this mixer that I'm sitting in front of, I've got a bunch of shit. It's just like morning radio because I fell in love with
The whole aesthetic of the morning radio guy. What's up,
yeah,
guys?
and not like in the I don't know, because it just felt corny, and I was like, I can do this better. It just felt to me like these guys were trying hard to be funny, or like a local reference would be like Mark Holmberg's Morning Sickness, or maybe you're familiar with like Tom Likas or like the Adam Carolla show when that was on terrestrial radio. I wanted to do all of that, like talk to people over the phone or however. And, the easiest way to do that was through a podcast because it was and still is free. And here I am doing it for free still.
You know what's crazy right now is we were just talking about before we started recording about this creepy attic.
Yeah.
And yeah, my light just turned off, so now I'm in the dark.
I know.
So we're gonna continue this in the dark because I don't feel like getting up.
This is maybe an internet first, or at least the first for me. So yeah, this is so yeah, that's where I am today. There's no real theme for the show. I've been leaning into true crime. I just sort of whatever the flavor that is running through me at the moment, I lean into in the show. And since TCAP is a pretty thick ribbon through it,
Oh, dude.
we're always there.
Yeah, but the morning DJ, that thing that really got me. Just the whole, hey guys, welcome. This is me. I'm on a radio. Welcome. The traffic's gonna be awesome and the weather's gonna be beautiful. So if you're gonna head on over,
Yeah,
morning DJ guy.
for 10 years, I had an intro that was, hey, everybody, welcome to the show. My name is Dave, and this is the Fistful of Podcast from fistfulpodcast.com. Let me introduce you to my co-host, and I'll run through the whole fucking 45-second spiel.
Very quickly, I got to tell you, that's
and it was a wild ride. It was fun.
Yeah. It also, but also the Art Bell stuff. What I liked about Art Bell was that, for those of you that grew up kind of like listening to his stuff, is what was awesome was that he never, like, if somebody called him like, "Hello, yeah, I saw a UFO," and then the UFO it flipped me off, and then a werewolf came down and it started chasing me through the woods, and Art Bell wouldn't say, "You're crazy." He'd say, "Tell me more."
Right.
Tell me what happened next. And it was such a great platform because he had this voice, and it was right, and it was entertaining. I was on the right until unfortunately he passed not too long ago, but
Yeah.
that's the kind. So when you said terrestrial radio, I was like, oh yeah, that's the stuff.
So
And go ahead.
Tying it in a little bit, now that you say that, like, because that's the thing, Art Bell, everybody is interested in everybody else's story. As long as you're willing to shut up and listen, everybody will just sort of spill. And that reminds me of Chris Hansen a little bit, right?
Yeah.
If Art Bell can sit and have these people call in and be like breathlessly frantic about something they believe in truly, and have him be like, yeah, go for it. Like, that's the same shit Hansen did, right?
Yeah, he was kind of like, well, why don't you tell me? What's up with that? You know, and he,
Yeah. It's that charisma that can pull weird out of people, because people want to get weird out of them.
yeah, and you know what's interesting is that Chris, oh, you can see my breath. It's not even that cold. Anyways, Chris Hansen, he really showed people how dangerous the internet was, because
Totally.
because what was that? What was originally his this whole thing was, we're gonna discover scams and all kind of stuff like that, but then went dangerous web.
Yeah.
You know, people didn't know how dangerous the internet was, because it was still, what year was that? It was like 2004, 2000 when he started doing that segment.
Yeah, it was between 2004 and I think it died in 2006.
Okay, and then people didn't know. Like, I remember one of the big advice they used to give people. They say, if you want your kids' grades to improve, don't put a TV in the room, put a computer. You know, and this was the internet age, and because people had no idea that they could go on the chat rooms, AOL.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Adults, like basically everybody, kids and adults alike, are functionally illiterate, and so that's the thing. Like, it's an axiom that I think holds true in literally every industry, but like, perverts control where money flows. So you may know this colloquial piece of information, but the deciding factor between Betamax and VHS was like which one the porn industry went with. And so just, magnify that to the future. You've got this technology called a computer, right? And you're a weirdo. And being a weirdo, you're like well-versed in different modes of communication. So the computer comes along and you're just a second ahead of literally everybody else. And you're, a one-eyed man in the land of the blind.
Yeah. And, but these perverts, like, it didn't just start off with the internet. It was, letters. Remember, they used to put ads in the paper, and what was crazy was, I was listening to this documentary, and they were talking about how back in like the 50s or 60s, there was people that would put ads in the paper to find their son or daughter a boyfriend or girlfriend. They put out a paper, a young lady, 15, she's valedictorian, whatever the hell that is.
Right.
She's a class president. And then imagine how many grown men answered those ads. Just, how many, back then, but the Chris Hansen at that time. Hey there, young man. You don't look young at all. You look like you're in your 50s.
Right. And that's something that's interesting to think about, right? Like, because it's not like predators popped in the internet age. Because, like, if you are familiar with Chris Hansen's early work, like, he would, I think he even like flew to like Thailand and like other places where sex tourism is a thing, right? And so, before the internet, these things had to happen IRL with like paper or code words and shit. And it's just sort of chilling to think that like you could be looking into the eyes of someone who like drops a code word to you, who's like phishing you, but it's so innocuous you don't know. And, they're a creep, like lurking under the surface to your happy fisherman at the checkout line or whatever.
Yeah, because it was code. I mean, you'd say something like, "Hey, I'm gonna take kids to what the hell is that? When you take them to school somewhere, to the zoo," and then that's code, and they're like, "Oh,
a field trip."
A field trip. I'm so sorry, man. I'm kind of fighting a fever here. A field trip, and then that was code, and then somebody standing around, they don't think anything of it. It was like, oh, that guy's looking for kids for a field trip. But there's that one guy, like that one scene from Pinocchio,
right?
Treasure Island. That one guy listens. He's like, oh, you're looking for kids to take them on a field trip. Follow me.
And you can say, well, there's like, because they like Chris Hansen and To Catch a Predator were basically skimming the surface because they weren't. I mean, you're as familiar as I am probably with all the decoys and the chat logs and the behind the scenes stuff and the Chris Hansen interactions. It didn't feel like, I mean, aside from adopting like the dumbest tween vernacular ever, it didn't feel like they were believable teenagers. So everybody who got caught just sort of felt stupid.
Yeah, like unless you're Lauren Armstrong, he's
right. And then you get like a whole, get a religion based on you later. But the thing of it is today is like if you wanted to go deep, there are so many apps and places to like get at vulnerable sections of society now. Like it would, like if Chris Hansen were to in earnest, like if things were like in a perfect world and they were like To Catch a Predator 2, this time we're doing it right, y'all, or whatever. They would have to dedicate like the first season to like the apps that they use, the weird code words, and every bit of the traffic, because it's no longer like a Kenneth Brakeman bumble fucking his way into just like a single chat room being like, talk about your dick or whatever.
You want to talk? You're gonna want to see my penis, Mr.
Yeah, like but I feel like that probably does happen. There's probably idiots out there being as obtuse as like being like, do you want to see my white stuff? But it feels like with everything out there now.
Well, yeah, because there's so many apps that you can actually use to communicate. I mean, how many people play online video games, and
for real.
If you're a kid and you're playing, I'm not too familiar with video games, but you're playing one of these Call of Duties or something, and you have the headset, and then you're a kid, some guy can just start like grooming the kid,
And it happens like the thing you're saying happens. It's happening probably right now as we speak. And that's the craziness about it, is like the more we fractalize society, like the more separated we get into, countries and then races and then tribes and religions. And then we're like going down and down and down to like finite personality traits. We make ourselves incredibly vulnerable to that shit. Because if like you're one of these people who's been pigeonholed, and now you're in one of these splinters of society in these discords or in these kick groups or in Whisper or whatever the fucking kid app is, like it doesn't take much to be like, hey, I'm a fellow teen who's really into X, because it doesn't take much to Google anything. Like it's as dumb as your parents seemed. It was, the onus is on them because now Google exists and you can go like, I don't know, my kids are talking about, wait, I have a smartphone, right?
Yeah, I can Google what this means if they're, and because your kid could be playing online with somebody, one of these games, and you're like, oh, who lives in your house? And then the predators like me, my mommy, and my daddy.
Seriously. Because and think of it like this. If you want to, because I like to keep things on the lighter side, but if you want to go dark, we could take a step into the grosser side of things. Because like let's take Jim Roush, right? The hilarious drunk uncle of tcap with the mustache and everything. And he just sort of comes off as like a buffoon, right? Does he come off as particularly threatening to you?
Well, that's what's dangerous, is that no, he doesn't.
Right. And here's the thing. So you look at him, and even like as a 13-year-old, now just divorce yourself of gender or the possibility of a sexual encounter, being 13 and being in a room with Jim Roush and like, first of all, whoa, let's deal with that. But like, just like kids, everybody remembers being a kid and interacting with adults and not like on some level, you're aware that you don't understand everything that's going on, but you're desperately trying to.
Yes.
And so even with people, that's a struggle. Like with family members, you're constantly trying to catch up because you're coming of age. You're like in that formative years where you go like, oh my God, I'm trying to learn to be a human. It just seems like extra, like, Jim has a couple vodka tonics. Have a good night, Jim. You pat him on the back and he spends 3 days in a drunk tank. But when you get down to it, like, could you imagine his gross, hulking, cellulite covered, white, like polar bear fur covered body, like interacting with a child in any way? Like, the potential to traumatize is off the charts.
Yeah, and you know, and the thing with, I can't listen to people reading the chat logs. Every once in a while, I'll listen to and I mentioned him a lot, is the Magnum Pot Pie, because he makes it entertaining, because he's. But if you actually stop and like read what they're saying, these people think that they're communicating with children, and once you put yourself in this mindset where you're like, man, this guy thinks this is really a kid, it's no longer funny. You start seeing how disgusting it is. But when it's the predators that were teachers, I mean, these people are surrounded by kids all day, and they observe the kids, and they can kind of hear the way they talk and all that kind of stuff. So then you watch them implement these tactics of grooming into these kids, and when you think about him whatever the person communicating online, he's surrounded by kids all day. Now imagine that teacher, what he's doing, offline, like, hey, stay, after class, whatever it is, so when you start getting to the darkness of a tcap, you see, and you're like, man,
Yeah.
this is horrifying. This is because to them, they're gonna spend 5 years if that, I mean,
yeah, probation probably
5 years, or sorry, man. 5 years in probation, or they do community service, or whatever it is. But then you got to think of that kid. If that kid was real, that person is going to go through therapy for the rest of their life, not trusting people.
right.
It ruins the way they interact with people.
It's an incredible slice of the human experience, because you and I and everybody walking the planet Earth have hypocrisies where we'll say we're against something, but we'll allow ourselves a little bit of that thing that we say we're against because of whatever bullshit reason we justify to ourselves. And 9.5 times out of 10, it's you eat one more donut that you said you did, or whatever. It's like a bullshit white lie. And when someone calls you on it, you throw your hands up and you go, oh, guilty. And you like slap each other on the shoulder and you blow on your coffee mug and you talk about Jean-Luc in Paris or whatever.
Yeah.
But in this situation, like where I can't remember if it was the short-haired teacher or Walter Babs. They may have both said this, but like I think they go out of their way to make it a point to be like, I never hit on a kid at my own school.
Yeah, and then you don't believe, because it falls in the same kind of like, you're full of shit. Like you.
Well, it also feels like you're a scumbag, but like you're trying to give you, it's like a pile of goo, like holding up a knight's shield, being like, I'm chivalrous, but it's a pile of shit. It's like a dog shit pile with a fucking shield on it, being like, check out the shield. Don't look any further. I don't.
Yeah, and
kids in my specific class.
And they interviewed a couple of the kids in class, the girls, and they were talking about how, and in the whole tcap thing, they did it quickly, but they did like a more thorough interview, and I guess they had complained because they felt uncomfortable with this guy, and he was like trying to look down their shirts on purpose, and he would like accidentally bump them and like rub up on against them, and they complained to the school, and the school was kind of like, like, oh, it's probably just an accident, or maybe that's not happening, and then you got to think, these girls that were going through that, and no one listens. Like, imagine what they grew up, like how they grew up mistrusting not just men, but just anybody, because even the parents didn't take any action,
Totally.
Yeah.
And here's where I think everybody, like, this is why everybody gut checks this on a visceral level, because everybody who makes the law presumably is old enough to have had sex by then. And so, everybody who did it by then got together and said, well, our first time was pretty impactful, and we were the ones presumably in charge of the experience. So we say, okay, until you're at least this age, don't. And so for it just kind of feels like we're all saying, check it, we're the chickens, here's our hen house, no one inside until later. And these guys just sneak in, and it just feels like, I don't know, because there's no other crime out there that is like this one. Because you can't have a crime of passion when it comes to this genre.
Yeah, you can't victimize a child.
Yeah.
And then say, well, I was temporarily insane.
Yeah.
You can't. No, this takes planning, and it takes even if you're as dumb as Lauren Armstrong. I mean, as stupid as he is, I mean, he spent a month talking to
Yeah.
a girl that he thought was 12 or 13. He, told him delete your archives. A call. He was taking measures to make sure he wasn't caught in the crime that he was committing.
Yeah, and I think this is why, even if like you're not into true crime, people keep up on this type of shit. Like TCAP was not true crime famous; it was pop culture famous.
Yeah.
Because in a murder case, no matter how rock solid a case, you'll always have somebody on one side or the other because nobody was there. You can't say what intent is or isn't way after the fact. And there's crimes of passion or whatever. So you can say, oh, well, there's mitigating circumstances. This is the one instance where you can't go, I was super angry or it was over the money. Like there's no other excuse.
Yeah. You wanted to
yeah,
destroy a kid.
Yeah, exactly. Because like you can't say, and that's you've heard it that they say, I don't know, I was stupid, I wasn't thinking, because there's no other way out. If you gun to your head, what do you say? It was an accident for weeks long.
And before the TCAP, you remember that guy from because we're probably the same age, me and you. That guy from America's Most Wanted. Was it John Walsh? Was that his name?
Yeah.
I'm John Walsh, and he was on a radio show in the early 2000s, and he was explaining how dangerous he believed the internet was getting, and you have to watch it because he lost a kid. I think his kid got kidnapped and murdered.
Yeah, it was at an arcade, I think. Oh,
and he was the one that was always advocating for, you have to watch your kids, you have to watch, and even back, and then he lost his temper one time, and I didn't know his backstory, but he was like very passionate protecting your kids.
Yeah.
And he was on a morning radio show, and he was talking to them about, you have to always keep your eye on the kids, like when they're on the computer, because at that time email was beginning to become really popular. You got to make sure, emails. You got to make sure that you know who your kids email. And one of the people say, well, don't you think that you're being a little bit too extreme? And he lost his cool. He's like, there's people out there that will take and fuck your kids, and he lost his temper. And sorry for the language, guys, but that's what he said.
It's your show, man. Hey, you're right. Like that's the thing. Is like it's so but here's the fucking problem. You want to get real, let's get real. As much awareness, as much education, as much money, as much love, as much prayer, whatever fucking resource you want to throw at this, right? There will always be niches in society to be filled. And there will always be people who neglect their kids. And they will always be easy victims. Like the lions will always go after the weak and the young gazelle. We cannot rid them from society. We can do our best, but because what do you do? Like when you look at like if you're into true crime, like the Brittany Gosney case, she straight up ran over her 6-year-old with her minivan, and they dumped his body in a river. That mom cannot receive enough education to make her not that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's something broken in their head. Not her head, but any of these people's heads. And I'm going to quote Alex Jones here, but he said, these people need to be beat over the head with a ball peen hammer. And as extreme as that sounds to a lot of people, you got to think. I mean, I go back to John Walsh. There's people out there that will take and they will rape your kid, and the people that were, and because John Walsh lost his temper when he said that, and I get it. I get the passion because he's right. I mean, and the people in the road are like, whoa, we're being, and he's like, what? and he was really upset because, yeah, I mean, that's all it takes is for you to take your eye off one of your children, and then this can happen, and they're screwed up for life. You can't. There's no rewind button. That kid's
Yeah. I get both sides now, because before I was a dad, all I could do was fence sit and postulate what the other side was like and be like, well, and we always, when we're not in those circumstances, it's easy to go, well, I would, and bullshit, because you haven't been in that situation. God forbid. If you're saying when I was in that, then we can talk. But if you say I would, then thankfully you haven't been there. And that's the thing. I get everybody who hasn't either been affected by a tragedy or has a family member affected by a tragedy, who believes in the best in humanity and all of that good stuff. I totally get their point of view. 100% legitimate. Get it. I also get the fathers who, like, I don't know if you know this case, but like in the 80s, this dude's son was molested repeatedly by his karate teacher. Who abducted him, and then when he was during extradition, he shot him in the head in the airport.
Yeah, in front of a crowd of people, in front of the police, I believe.
On TV, in front of the police. Yeah, it could not have been, like, it was an airtight case, should they? And then he, later died of a heart attack. But the thing is, like, I get his position too. I get both, and where do I stand? I thankfully don't have to make that decision, and I won't until I have to, because holy shit, I shouldn't have to, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and even the police that were there, they didn't seem that upset.
Yeah, because the one guy goes, "Oh, you really, Daly?" Like, says something along those lines where he's like, "Seriously, dude?"
Yeah, it's like, but how much do you think he was thinking? Like, oh man, this guy's the best. Because more than likely, they're like, this guy's gonna get 7 years, and he's probably gonna end up doing 5, and he's gonna get out for good behavior.
Right, and that's just it. And that's if you're an introspective person and you're not, because yeah, it feels good to, like, there's a guy, I can't remember his name. Goddamn, we did him on my show, but he killed his cellmate who had violated like a 7-year-old girl or whatever. Oh,
yep, the guy with the glasses.
Yeah, whatever his name is, Steven something. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I forgot his name too. But yeah, exactly. They asked him, like, why did you do it? And he says, well, he told him to shut up about the. Could you imagine sharing a cell with some guy that keeps, not just doesn't take responsibility like somebody we know, but makes up excuses?
Yeah.
And that to me is crazy. Have you heard of Operation Underground Railroad?
Maybe. You have to refresh my memory.
Okay, so Operation Underground Railroad is this organization that helps free kids from sex slavery, and they basically go to, and they give people tips on how to spot a kid that's being trafficked or being sold into prostitution. And one of the things was that this kid is, has a cell phone, and he's really young. He has a cell phone, or he's standing next to a person and follows this person around that doesn't seem like they're related. The kid has like brand new clothes, and they're out like at 10 o'clock at night with no parents, and those are like the signs that you look for, because this kid has a pimp that's always watching them, and they dress them nice, and it's basically like keeping an eye on them and making sure that he or she is has clients. And also, when they're in a group of like a couple of older teens, there's a bunch of kids, so they give these classes on how to identify all these things, and then they actually give statistics on how many kids are being victimized in this way, and the numbers were astronomical. Like, it was crazy. Like, you don't think that happens in this country, but dude, there was like thousands of kids in the United States alone a year, different kids. And when you go to places like Walmart and you see that big wall of missing teens and missing kids, they're saying that 85% of the kids up there are probably being sold into prostitution and have a pimp. And
I know but that's the thing too. Like, here, I don't know. I'll give you a couple different examples. It feels like here we are, even the poorest person here is like better than a middle class person in a third world country. And so it feels like our home lives are just like, we don't care about our kids or this or that. And so they run away and are abducted into this. Whereas like on the other side of the world, the people are so poor, they're literally selling their children. Like here, if we only cared enough to take an interest in our fucking kids, because that's all they really want. Like the only currency children traffic in is attention. And, it just seems like two sides of the same coin where it's like, the problem is we have too much and we just popped out a bunch of kids. Don't give a shit. Please leave me the fuck alone. And then they just go disappearing and they end up on a poster in a Walmart. Or like those poor, like people in Indonesia or Taiwan or Thailand. And these people were like $6. They're selling a living being that came from them and because they have no other option.
Oh yeah, definitely. Dude, I've lived in El Salvador.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and my parents are Salvadorian. So
I was wondering how you knew Spanish so well. So that's a question answered.
do you speak Spanish?
I don't know shit anymore. When I worked in construction work, I knew it front, back, left, down, right, and center. But now I haven't spoken in 10 years. I don't know shit.
Yeah, they're like, mira que el señor que está allá, ten cuidado. You know?
All the dudes used to say, no mames, way. They used to say
that. Yeah, those people, no mames, mira, yeah. So in places, what's crazy is that here in this country, I mean, we have overweight homeless people. How crazy is that? We have, and in places like El Salvador, you have people that if they're living on the streets, you better join a gang or do something because you're going to starve to death. And those cases where people sell their kid, that's a real thing. They'll sell their kids to the government because the government always, the minimum age of enrollment, I got to check to see what it is now, but 1998 and all those, the minimum age for enrollment in the military was 12 years old.
Jeez.
So people got, I don't remember what it was. I think $30 American for you to give your kid to the government. They're like, oh yeah, we'll turn him. How old is he? Yeah, we'll turn him into soldiers. So people were doing it. They were selling their kids. People would have, one of the big things was people would be extremely happy if they had boys because they're like, okay, we have a boys. How many boys? We have 3. Okay, if things get really bad, we can always sell this one.
That's $90.
Yeah, exactly. But with girls, it was different. They better hope that somebody can come and, ask for it. Dude, girls were getting married at the age of 13 by older guys. Old guys come like, hey, you have a daughter. I think she's pretty. And these were guys in their 40s.
Oh, totally.
Like, oh, your daughter's pretty. I'm. And what's crazy is these people spoke English. That's what's hilarious. Is that it's crazy. They spoke English. These people moved to places like El Salvador because the dollar value back then was so big. They would move, buy property, and then they could go and be like, hey, how old is your daughter? 13? Well, I happen to like kids. Like, I'll give you $20.
That's no joke. Like sex tourism turned like sex residency is fucking. And there are people who like build careers on it. Speaking of keeping it in the true crime bait, are you are familiar with Richard Huckle? That case?
Ooh, I don't believe so.
It's a nightmare from stem to stern. Moral of the story is he was one of these sex tourists, victimized countless small children, wrote manuals, was like one of those dudes.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And he's one of those cases where I always forget and I go, oh, thank God. He was horrifyingly murdered behind bars. And I go, whoo, because I keep forgetting that. And I go, my God, what if he gets out someday?
Well, no, he's not kidding.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah. I go, oh, yeah.
They toss his body out in the garbage, on garbage day. But, yeah. But a lot of these situations where these people kidnap kids in the United States and they take them for a sex trafficking, the first thing they do, I mean, people watch the movie Taken and they're like, okay, in the movie Taken, they're going to addict them to drugs, but don't worry, Liam Neeson is going to come in and he's going to rescue these girls. In reality, that's the first thing they do is they do addict them to drugs.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
They keep them, as prostitutes. They do whatever they want with them. They have their pimp, and and they have the bottom bitch, which is like a a prostitute like who's 29, but in that range, she's already like an older woman, and then
Oh
she
yeah.
controls the younger girls, and she keeps them hooked on drugs. She finds clients for them, and what's sad is that you get organizations like underground. I think they do a little bit more thorough jobs, but then you have like all these other places where they'll come and they'll free the kids. They're like, we're gonna free them, and the guy goes behind bars, and he gets out, like in 2 years, and then these kids, because they're addicted to drugs, they come back because their lives are completely destroyed. They get Stockholm syndrome, and then the kids
Yeah.
they freed are back at the street again willingly. They come back.
Right. And that here's our problem because well, it's twofold because growing up, your family life seems normal, even if it's toxic in unequivocal terms. You live in one household and everything that happens there is just normal. So if you're getting beaten or like any other weird shit's going on, that's just day-to-day life. And those people, those kids, go into society and are easily victimized because, you know, victims walk around with a big V on their forehead to predators. Like, there's something about insecurity that just seeps out of people like skunk odor. Like, even if you're not a predator, you can smell it on people. Like, if
Well,
in, insecurity is just there for everyone to see.
here's what's crazy is that, okay, so they did a study. Who did this study? Who was it? Man, it doesn't matter. Anyway, so they did a study where they filmed the people walking in and out of places, and a majority of them were women. And then they took these tapes and they took them to a prison, and they put the tapes like in front of these people. Yeah, a cassette tape, a DVD, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And they asked, who would they put like 10 people, okay, walking to one place, and they come back, and then just regular stuff. So then they asked, which one of them would you pick as your target? These people are already convicted. They did they're there.
Yeah.
They said, who would you pick? And they said, well, I would pick this one, and then I would pick this one. Not this one. I would avoid this one. I would avoid that one. And then they did this whole thing. They did this with over 100 inmates, different actors. And then in the end, it turns out that somehow they could identify the people that did this study. Like, there was a woman that was walking, and this guy was like, oh yeah, her, I would pick her, and I would talk to her, and blah blah blah. Well, it turns out that she was a victim of a severe domestic violence.
Mm-hmm.
And just by the way she walked and she carried herself, the guy that was saying this is the one that I would victimize, this guy was put in prison because not only did he beat several women, he killed one by beating him to death. And another guy, he was in there. He's like, oh, her, I would avoid her. The ones that they avoided were women that were taking either self-defense or were in the military, but they
Mm-hmm.
weren't wearing the uniform. They were in regular civilian clothes, just walking up and down. And it was just the way that they walked. They walked a little bit different. They looked around a little bit different. And then the guy was like, oh yeah, I'd pick her. This woman,
This
victim of
concept,
sexual abuse.
mhm. This
This guy's
concept is
rapist.
something that people overlook utterly. Like, we recognize it in lower forms of life. Why the fuck do we get so haughty when it comes to us? Like, there is, like, if you started watching now and lived to be a million, you would not see all the footage that PBS has on the hunters of the Serengeti. And that's not a skill that's like unique to the big cats. If you are a predator, you're going to study your prey. You're going to look for patterns in people that are easily exploitable. So no shit, Sherlock. Like, I'm not to you, obviously, but to everyone who's like, oh, I don't know, blah, blah, blah. Like,
I'm gonna look behind me and be like, who's he talking to you?
no, yeah, it's like everybody who's like, I don't get like how they are like pick their victims or like how these people are so good at yada yada yada. Anything you do, you are going to build your proficiency at. I don't care if you want to play the fucking violin or if you want to be a disgusting like David what's his nuts with his murder playroom. The skill doesn't matter what it is. Doing it over and over again will make you a better whatever. And it doesn't take much because all you had to do is ask these fools, like, what would you do, to see where exactly their expertise was. They may come off as stupid. They may not know how to do math or read, but they know exactly how to excise human victims from the population.
Yeah, and that's what's crazy. And then there was another study done, and I mean, a lot of people could say, "Oh, this is victim blaming," and blah blah blah. But they did a study where they had these people that were victims. They themselves were victims of something, either sexual abuse, verbal abuse, whatever it was. And then they had people like do a hello, my name is blah blah blah, and then they just like told them about themselves a little bit, and they said which one of the guys was the most appealing to you, and then this girl was like, oh, this number three. I thought that just the way he carried himself. Well, it turns out this guy was an inmate because he had sexually abused several women. He blah blah blah, and the woman that was a victim found herself attracted to this guy, even though the guy didn't say, "Hey, I rape people."
Yep.
Something about him. So they say that the statistic of a woman who gets beat, statistically, she will, if she does leave, she will probably end up in another relationship with another man that beats her.
Oh,
And
likely.
it's the pattern. I mean, and it, like you said, if they're raised in an environment where this kind of stuff happens, to them that's normal. Even if they recognize that it's not okay, they're like, man, I shouldn't be getting hit in the face. But something about it's just this is what they're used to. This is
It's
what
our hypocrisy. We don't like, because how many obviously we'll never know, but how many women who are beaten by their husbands at home are like the take no shit badass bitch whatever at work or whatever. You know what I mean? We all compensate and we make up for our shortcomings in other places. And it's easy to just like, after all is said and done, and the dude or whoever the abuser is goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Here's some presents," and they love bomb me, and they go into that manipulation cycle again. If that's your diet, that's the thing. We're all in this together. And if we're all going to start talking about intent and responsibility, at what point? Because if a victim can go like, well, they made me do this, and we go, oh my God, you're so right. But then if someone accused of a crime goes, this person made me do this, we go, you sack of shit. You're a fucking criminal. This is a victim. You made them do this, and you can't be made to do anything because you're bad. Only good people can be made to do things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's like what you brought up, the charisma points. You can turn those charisma points for good or evil. Like, there's no rules.
Yeah. Can you be a good salesman? Yes. Can you, groom somebody? Well, of course, and
That's just it. Like, we.
Bro, it's so dark.
It is, but that's the thing. We've got. When you dive into one side of the pool or the other, it's going to seem like it is. It's going to be like an extreme. We're in a bell curve where like a lot of terrible things happen, but also a lot of good things happen. And the rest of us are mostly in that slump in the middle where a lot of nothing happens.
Yeah, and the only reason why we know about all these things is because we have the internet now, we have the TV. But think about how rampant that stuff used to be before there was
Oh yeah,
internet and all that kind of stuff. You had to, by really search for it. You had to really ask questions. But now you could just go, oh, there it is. Watch this.
Yeah, it's we're whatever. It's the same as it is in every system. I don't care if it's the system of ecology and you've got a predator and prey situation, literally or metaphorically, where we're all just dabbling in, the land of ideas like law and order. You're going to have one side pull ahead temporarily to the consternation of the other, only for them to fuck more with the other side and vice versa. Like, that's just like, we can't ever, we can hope to be as good as we can, but the people who say one day all crime and the streets will be clean or yada, yada, yada. No, like the snake will always eat the chicken and the chicken will always try to get away from the snake.
Yeah, that's a fever dream. Like, if you think that one day there's going to be no crime, that's dumb. You get that guy like, we're going to rid the city. Like, no, you're not. You're just going to make them better at hiding.
Walk into a single double wide trailer you hear yelling from the inside of and try to hash all those problems out before fucking tackling society and tell me how you feel, right?
What's great? You remember that old Jeff Foxworthy joke about how he said, when they asked 100 women what kind of man are they attracted to, a lot of them said a dangerous man. He said they all said a dangerous man. He says they must mean somebody like a James Bond, because when you end up marrying a dangerous man, you end up sticking your head outside of a trailer with a moo saying "lock his ass up" on an episode of Cops.
Yeah,
lock his ass up.
Seriously. And that's part of it too. People's words will tell you nothing. I don't listen to what anybody tells me anymore. I look at their actions. Because if they say, I'm so sick and tired of XYZ, and it's the 40th time you've heard that fucking thing, what they're actually saying is, I love the fuck out of it, and I want to talk about it a lot more. Because how many times do you have to say, I'm sick of it before you actually are, right?
Yeah, before you actually do something about it.
Exactly.
I mean, what's that adage? It says, don't ever question what somebody says, question why they say it.
Right. I don't know. That's just all. That's the problem with true crime and the dark side of everything is like we want to live in the dichotomy. We want to be the person with the brightest flashlight shining into the darkest corner and being like, my God, let's rid this from the planet Earth. And thank God I had this flashlight. In the meantime, we're desperately shaking that light in the opposite direction of the dark shit that we don't want people to do.
Yeah. Dude, that's such an excellent point. That's crazy.
But most of us don't have like a fucking Carlsbad cavern of perversion. Like you shine a light in my corner, you're going to see some weird stuff. Yeah, definitely. Nothing illegal, nothing like that would make you want to throw up or your head would spin. But it would still be embarrassing. But we all have those. It's just how deep do you want to dig your fucking cave and risk like Vin Diesel throwing a flare gun into it and being like, ah, you know? Jesus.
That guy likes to dress up like a clown.
Yeah. Or, yeah, whatever costume you want to get into, you furry weirdos.
Yeah, weirdos drinking out of a bowl in a hotel. Come on, grow up.
All right, everybody's got a weird thing.
Why do you think that we're so attracted to things like true crime and like because it's horrible stuff, but we tune in?
I've been asked this question so many times, and I've asked this question so many times. I think a new facet of it is not only do we like to look at the dark stuff, we are sort of compelled by the morbid, but it does sort of, you get to role play a little bit. You as the average, at least I do. I can't project. I shouldn't project. I have come to realize about myself that when I look and I watch all this interrogation footage, whether it be tcap or beyond, I try to put myself in the situation of being grilled, not necessarily committing that heinous crime, but let's say I was a criminal and I was in this situation.
It's almost like you're watching them and they have nowhere to go, and then you're like, right. Okay, what do you do in that situation?
It's a dark exploration of your own soul, because I put myself in that situation. I go, okay, I'm not, what's his nuts? Chad, the guy who killed his parents.
Oh, dude, there's a lot of those. The Menendez brothers.
The recent one, Bart and Chad Halderson. I would put myself in that situation where like the writing was on the wall and there was no way out, but I would substitute his double parent homicide with something that I did that's real, like maybe a speeding ticket as an example. And I'd go, oh my God, like, so you get to sort of run yourself through the ringer a little bit and sort of expunge yourself a little bit of your guilt.
Yeah.
I feel bad. Like there's one I watch repeatedly, because it does give me that sort of tingling where I get to go, oh, I kind of like feeling bad because it makes a, old world sort of Judeo-Christian classical justification of my sins, even though I know that's fucking absurd.
Wow. So what you said, it puts us in almost like a role-playing thing. Like I watch like some of the To Catch a Predator, and then I think sometimes, like, if I was in that position where I'm interviewing somebody and you have the chat logs, would I remain calm? Like, would you say, help me out? Or would you like leap across the counter and start choking one of them? like what do you do? And then you start putting yourself in Chris's position. Like, what is he thinking right now? How could he's face to face with somebody who tried to rape a kid?
Yeah, but it's kind of like you or I looking at a member of a SWAT team in full riot gear and being like, what it would be like if we were standing exactly where they were, holding their gun, but without their gear. Like, by the time Chris Hansen was in front of those, gawking idiots on TCAP and beyond, he had already been hardened. Like, he had been all over the world. Like, he had built up that resistance. So you or I, sure, we're the average man on the street, and these dudes are just like us, and we want to get at them. But Chris Hansen has seen these dudes go through the ringer, so it's probably just a matter of like, I don't give a fuck whether you do or not. Like, it would help my career. It would be great TV, but he knows that he's about to hear sheriff's office and a bunch of crushing of gravel.
Yeah, and what you said was true. He did develop a almost like an immunity to that emotion, because his early stuff, I think he went to what is that place where they have all the scams in the country of Africa? Is that Uganda?
Yeah, I think so. Or Nigeria?
Nigeria, that's where it was. Nigeria, right by Lagos. Anyways, so he went, and they were running some kind of mail scam, like, and he was there, and he used to see how green he was because you see him sweating, and he's like and there's these people that they can kill you, and there's no law to stop them.
Right.
Oh, like all they gotta do is give like the officers, if they do show up, like $5, and it's like, we saw nothing, and they leave. And he's sitting there and he's like asking them questions like, so where is this package? But you see him like sweating a little bit, and you kind of hear a little bit of it in his voice. And then when you think of where he was doing these kind of things in these kind of harsh environments, and then he comes to the safety of the United States, and he's got the cut, like, yeah, of course you're going to have kind of a cool demeanor. It's because the environment changed, but you cut your teeth going to these dark places. He even went to Chicago where the mob was running lottery scams, and he has to keep his composure.
Right. Like, it's no coincidence that like the hardest swords are tempered in the hottest fire. Like, if Chris Hansen hadn't gone through and been scared shitless and had all of that pounded out of him, because in most people's lifetimes, you're not going to see enough of any one pattern to sort of put it all together and go like, oh, one person cannot make a difference, grand scheme. And so you'll just sort of spin that wheel. By the time Chris Hansen was like, probably 5 years into his career, he must have seen like the, unstoppable marching forward and the grinding gears of society and time that chew up humanity, with no rhyme or reason, seemingly, like sitting in front of Chuck Harding in a fucking California kitchen must have been like eating a donut in like the Krispy Kreme for you and me. Right? Like,
you know who else was good besides Chris Hansen? Do you remember Greg Geraldo? Was it? Geraldo Rivera. Remember that guy?
Yeah.
Mustache. That guy had his TV show, and he had like Ku Klux Klan member. He had the Black Panthers on the same stage as the Ku Klux Klan, and they're throwing chairs, they're fighting, and he's just sitting there like with his mustache and all kinds of stuff. And people are like, how did he remain calm? Back in his day, Geraldo, the mob put a hit out on him because he was interviewing mobsters and exposing their stuff. And again, it just falls back into the category of this guy has callus from working that shovel. By the time he gets to a certain place, he doesn't feel it anymore.
Yeah, here's the thing. You can look at it one of two ways. Yeah, you can say, the hands on that shovel moving load after load of human shit got so callous they can't even feel the work anymore. But I would like to think that they just sort of realize that people are going to be people, and it's easier to sit back and watch than it is to sit and think how you would do it better. I think there's no other way to put it. Like, if you are in the position where you're always on that vanguard of the stranglehold of controlling any situation, you're going to fuck it up. Chris Hansen in all of those situations had 100% control, but his grip was so loose, they didn't even know they were being strangled. And
Yes.
that's the beauty of the charisma, right? Is like when Chris Hansen is sitting there with his words of buttered velvet, then these creeps are sweating through their 12 layers onto their camera or whatever, but still answering questions. It's just as effective as when the big, bald, angry mountain of a man goes, "God damn it, why did you come to my county, you motherfucker?" And they're up on the table.
Yeah, the difference between Chris Hansen and Steve Wilkos. You
Yeah.
remember? but yeah, and that's what it was. I mean, well, before Chris Hansen owed Theo Vaughn $730, he basically handed these guys rope, and they were talking like, "Oh yeah," and they're like wrapping a rope around their necks, like, well, and they're just like, yeah, so
by the name of the challenge. But have you seen the new episodes of his stuff, like Have a Seat on True Blue?
I tried to watch it. I couldn't get into it.
I'll tell you this. If you're looking for that old tcap charm, you're not going to get it. It's a lot more raw. It's a lot more, there's no other word. It's a lot cheaper, but it does still sort of give me the same vibes because, we, back in the day, you'd say, well, why are they talking to Chris Hansen? Especially later in the seasons when they knew it was Chris Hansen, they knew the cops were outside. Like, dudes will walk into a house, not see Chris Hansen until they've eaten 8 square feet of shag carpet, and then they sit their ass down, and Chris Hansen walks in slowly and goes, "I'd like to have a conversation with you," and they'll still talk to him for 40 minutes.
Well, a lot of it was also, well, it could be two things. So what I tried when I tried watching, the new True Blue stuff, a lot of it was these people were talking because they knew they had nowhere to go. It's like, I'm done. I did this, and so might as well spill my guts now. In comparison to the old stuff where the guy tried to get himself out of the situation, and you watched him kind of like try to spin a yarn, like the whole "these houses for sale,"
Yes.
and I'm having a heart attack, and he's falling down and trying to do, so it's like completely different things, but you get two kind of different confessions. One of them was when the guy was finally caught, and he was like, "Yeah, I did this." In comparison to the newer stuff where the guy's like, "Well, I got nowhere to go. I'm already done." Yeah, I try to hook up with her, and
right, but that just sort of squashes all arguments, right? Because if like there's no perceived threat of police and they talk, or there is definitely police presence. As a matter of fact, in one of them, like the dude's face is like bloody, that he's like bashed and he's actively bleeding as he's talking to Chris Hansen. And here's, I think, the biggest card being played. If it were anybody other than Chris Hansen, he wouldn't get this shit. But since it's Chris Hansen, like, imagine, because he's a quasi celebrity. Like, imagine going into some place, like trying to steal like a 6-pack as an 18-year-old, right? And you get your ass tackled to the ground and pulled to a back room. And like, then Christina Ricci walks in and she goes, "Why are you trying to steal beer out of my thing?" Like, you've forgotten about your crime because it's fucking Christina Ricci.
Yeah. You're like, "Oh, tell me about, what the hell was that movie? The Addams Family."
Yeah, tell me about Toots is the driving cat or whatever. So like, but that's it now. Because now Chris Hansen walks in and you go, "God damn it, Chris." And you just want to go like, bro, because now that he's gotten rid of that horrible rooster haircut that he had for a while, he's finally back on track. You just want to go like, "God damn it, Chris. Thank you." And I'll answer it.
Oh, and he got that stylish haircut on the new True Blue show. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Looks like he got a fade, like he went to Detroit and walked into a barber shop and he's like, "Give me the usual." And they're like, "Well, let's tune him up."
That was the right choice. Like, from the YouTube drama up until like very recently, his hair was not good. He had like a trap door that kept springing open. There was like a tcap goblin trying to pop out the back of his head.
It was the little guy from the tcap, the guy that had the bird on his head. And
it's Westerbeck. Yeah, Westerbeck hid behind that flap for years, I feel.
Until he's like, "Oh, it's to come out."
Yeah. Finally, his barber gave him a high enough fade, and he's like, "Oh my God, there's a Westerbeck in here, and he's got a bird on his head."
No, you have your head full of bird shit.
Yeah, he's just combing pound after pound of cockatoo shit of Chris Hansen's head. Like, what the fuck's going on here, Chris?
It's like, what is going on?
You got a tiny man in here sitting on a stool eating chips. Chris.
Yeah, and he's like, I thought he was giving me cookies. Turns out that it was bird shit the whole time.
Oh my god. Yeah. Those
Dude, what a dark topic. That was crazy.
Yeah, but that's it, right? Like that if you want to I don't give advice because I give as much as I expect. I give as much to people as I expect them to take, which is zero. But personally, if I don't come to true crime with a heavy emphasis on like the absurdity of it, you would be one, because there's a bunch of people out there on YouTube that I can't watch their stuff anymore because they just turned into a torrent of swirling hate fuck, and it just like if you're in it for a lot of things, the information, the drama, the this, the that. You have to be go ahead.
Talking about YouTube no, brother. Talking about YouTube beefs. Like what?
Not necessarily beefs. There was just people's content out there that, like true crime in specific, that I started liking, but as I got more and more, and like their content was upped in quality, it also felt like their humanity got tarnished a little bit. So it went from like, here are the crimes and here's a few bits of commentary and I'm out, to like, this steaming pile of fucking shit and that's how they start the video. And it's just like a 90-minute hate fest of like, yeah, we all know murderers are bad. Like, I don't need someone moralizing at me about murder.
Yeah, it started off as like an intelligent, like, well, let's look today at today's content, and then it ends up being a Macho Man promo. Yeah, let me tell you something about Chris Hansen. Yeah. Yeah.
It just feels like I came for the content, not for the fucking telegraphing that you're better than a murderer. Yeah, thank you, YouTube creator.
Yeah, thanks for the information. What pisses me off is when you have somebody that started off with a certain topic, and this is what they did. They're like, okay, we're going to discuss this. And then for some reason, they turn their sights on attacking other YouTube people. And then they're like, can you believe what this guy did this week? And it's like, dude, what happened to your content?
I know. YouTube is a weird ecosystem. I love it. I spend a lot of time on it. I don't want to get too deep into it though, because it feels like every time big communities form, drama, scandal, there's schism, stuff happens, nobody cares, and then it recycles. So
they no longer talk about what they were originally talking about. Instead, they hate on another community that might be tackling the same stuff. Yeah. And I can't get into it. Like with these communities, I kind of just watch and then I'm like, let's move on to somebody else.
Yeah. But that's maybe it's a stigma, because if you look in positive corners of the internet, it's easy to be turned off by this, like the manufactured saccharine sweetness of it. But if you go to the darker side of YouTube, it's easy to see why people hate the internet.
Yeah.
And there's very few places in the middle where you're interacting with people who just have a moderate opinion. Like, they're not here to be an edgelord. They're not here to win brownie points or karmatic brownie points by telling, whoever's reading this to have a beautiful, blessed day and namaste. Those things are just as confusing to me as the death threats to just like anybody who reads this.
Yeah, that's so crazy. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm not gonna shout out to Bare Knuckle Crew. I'm not gonna point people out, but they're like, yeah, and then you know what this sack of crap did? He went and he said that, and then the end of the video is, remember, guys, you're important and you matter. That's how they end the video, and it's like, dude, you just went for 40 minutes about how much you hate these people and these people did this, and you're gonna end up with a positive message.
Right. That's our weird hypocrisy, that if an ounce of self-awareness sort of drip into their heads, they go, wait, what? That's stupid. But that's 99% of people. And whatever, we all point at each other and do the same thing, but that's totally fine. I'm totally fine. I do it. I'll expect it of other people. And if someone calls me out, I'll go, you got me, because what else am I going to do? I don't want to like be disingenuous and be like, yeah, I do love fruit by the foot when I said I only love fruit roll-ups or whatever the case may be.
Back and you go, oof, that's me.
Yeah, as I'm saying. But the people who project the most are the ones that I stay the furthest away from because, like, YouTube is a great place for gaslighting too.
Yeah.
There are so many weird, quaint terms for like psychological abuse that we do to one another. And that's probably my favorite because it's the quaintest and it's also like, yeah, I think it takes the most time because if you're going to consistently mess with someone to the point where like they start questioning their own reality, I mean, that's a dedicated detriment.
You know, what you're saying is that, so I've been doing this show for, I think, about a year, a little bit less than a year. And I was, I was doing conspiracies and I was doing, and I would kind of watch people's channels, but I wasn't paying attention to the kind of the stuff was like, I'd see somebody like what you said about like that psychological abuse that people inflict on other people. They're like, this person's a locale,
Yeah.
a lol, whatever they want to call it. And I was like, huh, that's weird. And I kept watching. And then now that I kind of like am becoming familiar with the terms and like what certain things mean and the weight they carry behind them. And then when I hear somebody saying like, this is a locale, I'm like, ooh, I cannot believe he's abusing this person like this. And then the person that sees that message and it's about them, they're like, oh, am I a locale? What am I doing? And you watch them try to reinvent themselves over and over because it's a psychological abuse.
Yeah, it's this, we're in this weird, because now, by and large, the internet is just as real to people as real life is. So, like, things are now transferring from one to the other. And I am not a troll. I don't ever want to be a lolcow, but I do like to watch those communities because it is the encapsulation of, in every ecosystem, every niche must be filled because nature abhors a vacuum. So all the gross little nooks and crannies, all the toxic little sub pockets and neuroses and idiosyncrasies that have always existed now get to live under a spotlight on YouTube. And like, Jesus Christ, it makes me feel like I got to take breaks for days at a time because it does.
It wears on you a little bit. You kind of feel that person's pain, the person that people are making fun of, or like watch his video really quick and they play something of them that maybe they weren't trying to be funny or trying to be, and they become a source of ridicule. And then you feel bad for that person. It's like you said, me and you, how old are you, by the way, if you don't mind me asking?
I think I'm 38.
Okay,
yeah,
I'm 34.
39.
So we're roughly around the same age, 35, 34, 39.
39, 35. You're a good directions. Okay.
I'm not gay, but we grew up in the we grew up in mostly where the internet wasn't this big of a thing, you know. So we kind of look a little bit past certain things, but then there's people who they grew up and the internet was already, everything. Everything was through the internet. So then to them the internet looks like something different. I mean. To them, when somebody says a certain thing about you, it hurts, it stings. Somebody might as well spat in your face in person because they don't know any different. Because it's like, whoa, this is real life. Somebody like me and you can, if somebody's like attacking us online, I think that it would kind of sting for a little bit. But they're like, well, it is the internet because we kind of lived outside of it. But there's some kids out there, like some younger people in their 20s, which the internet is as real as being face to face with somebody, face to face with somebody.
And you know what's crazy? So dig on this metaphor really quick, because you and I are probably aging into this demographic where like you probably went through this a million fucking times in car rides with people older than you, where they would point out to where some houses or some buildings were, and they go, that used to be all orange groves when I was a kid, right? So you and I are doing that exact bullshit right now, save for like we're driving through the internet, only visiting the same old places. So the old town is still the old town, and our kids are driving.
Analogy.
but all the younger generation are going down the same roads, but seeing all the brand new shit that we don't see because we're too old and feeble and our glasses are thick, and we're just going to Google or YouTube or checking my emails, or I got to check in on my knitting circle on Twitter or whatever our old bullshit is.
Yeah,
So
I was around for the Northridge Hospital in California. It's like, oh, that hospital demolished and killed thousands of people. Now
right.
it's a brand new building.
So, but who now? Like, at what point am I going to be in a position where I'm that older generation where I'm driving my son through the internet and being like, that used to be where Twitter was or whatever? Because it'll be completely different to both of us almost all the time. We have no common ground anymore, at least in like a digital space.
Well, here's a another thing is me and you when we do a show, we're showing our face. We're doing all these kind of things. What about those people out there that's just creepy because they don't show their face, they want to hide because and then they're super shitty to people. They
Yeah.
go on, they attack other people, they go ahead because they live in a place where they feel kind of safe,
Yeah.
and but then they're the most sensitive because they grew up on all it takes is for you to call them something like a noob or a lurker or something, and then that stings,
Right.
because
There,
of
there's a couple of sides of this coin, probably. If you're the type of person to like have a bunch of insecurities but attack other people for theirs who coincidentally happen to be yours, you're going to have like a graphic or a cartoon or an avatar for your face because it's if you are attacked, I imagine you'd have to have political levels of hypocrisy. Like you would have to get on a television to talk to America at large to be like, I think gay people are of the devil, to then 6 hours later be caught on one side of a glory hole. You know what I mean?
who was that senator? That was it a senator that was in
Yeah,
that
throw a
airport
dart.
bathroom?
Yeah, seriously, pick one. But that's the thing. You would have to open
Who's a
yourself
senator?
up to
Yes.
but you'd have to open yourself up to that. Like if you have nothing to hide, or if you feel like you have nothing worth destroying, or you're confident in yourself, or any number of reasons, your face pops up here. But there are also paranoid people. Like if you live in the UK, a lot of UK YouTubers I enjoy don't show their face, and I get it because they're under constant scrutiny. Like it's 1984 over there. Every
Yeah.
square inch of London, you're being recorded by 1 to 10 cameras at a time.
And
So
it's also coming here pretty soon.
well, I see. That's the thing. I get it. So if you have nothing to hide, but you're intensely um, interested in your own personal privacy, you you can have an innocuous reason or a really creepy reason. But since you are hiding, we always tend to lean toward the creepy, right?
Yeah.
Like if someone pleads the fifth, we're not supposed to hold that against them, but secretly.
Or like, what's going on there, mister?
Yeah, like in the UK, you can answer no comment, but it feels like when they say, "Did you kill this guy?" and you say no comment,
They're like, he did it.
I mean, the cards on the table here.
Who was that? There was a comedian that was talking about the Neuralink and all that stuff that's coming. How pretty soon, everybody will be able to read everybody's thoughts and all kinds of stuff. And then he said, but imagine if there was people out there that designed that they sold a helmet that will block your thoughts so people couldn't see them, and then people would watch you walk down the street with this bucket on your head. They'll be like, look at that liar over there. That's a liar. What is he hiding?
I think that the idea of anything becoming too big always topples. I don't think that, at least in my heart of hearts, we're not headed toward oblivion via our own mechanical or electronical machinations. Nature is a self-correcting system. I feel like worst case scenario, we have been on the planet, cosmically speaking, less than a second of that 24-hour clock. A billion other cooler species have come and gone. Like even if we subject ourselves to like horrors that we could only do to ourselves, at worst, the Earth gets wiped and it has to start again. Yeah, it sucks, but like
But that's a cycle.
yeah, like we're less cool than the dinosaurs. We'll never be that cool. So everything we do is going to be diminishing returns.
I'll punch a velociraptor in the stomach.
Give it a shot. I love to see that.
Dude, I'll do it. I'll creak you, or somebody hits you in the stomach, you're gonna go, I'm kidding. But Anyways, brother,
Yeah,
we're
man.
kind of coming to an end here. So, is there anything you want to plug, brother? This was fun, dude.
Hey, yeah.
You're a great conversationalist. You should be on old time radio.
It's been old time radio. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I guess I'll plug my show, FFOP Radio. That's the handle, my channel over on YouTube. Here. I'm leaning heavily into true crime because it is so visceral a topic. I love humans. They're infinitely fascinating. And true crime is a way that people's stories are told. Like meeting people will be obscutative. Oh, God damn it. They're going to be obtuse. They're going to dance around the issue. Where in true crime, the prosecutor's job, they lack that. But it's the prosecutor's job to get to the bottom of it. And it's nice to have a story of a person. And it's also probably the only place where we get 2 or 3 sides.
Brother, really quick, where does your the name of your show come from? Does it come from the old Western, Fistful of Dollars?
You nailed it. Yes. It was like the Fistful Trio or Trilogy or whatever, Man with No Name trilogy. One of my favorites out there, like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, is maybe top 5 for me. So yeah, totally, it is definitely.
I like Hang 'em High. I don't know why, but Hang 'em High was a good. Did you ever watch that one?
Yeah, I have like that one. I love Pale Rider too, where he comes back as the devil.
Yeah, he comes back as the ghost.
Yeah.
What is it? Is it Pale Rider? No, it's
Pale Rider. Because it's the biblical reference.
oh well, which one's the one? High Plains Drifter. That's the one that I was thinking of. I was thinking of a completely different one.
Yeah, High Plains Drifter is a good one too.
He comes back as a ghost. He's not the devil. He's a ghost, right? Kind of.
Well, so because Pale Rider is the one where he comes back and avenges his own death, right? Like he kills.
Yes. Yeah, and he names it Hell, right?
Yes, because in High Plains Drifter, he's avenging his near death because he's got that rope scar because they were going to hang him unjustly.
Yeah, okay. And then he comes back and he's just.
Yeah. Basic idea. He comes back and he's like a fucking demon who destroys the town. And the other one, he's just a guy who almost got strangled.
Almost got strangled, and he comes back and he's picking him off one by one.
Like, given, pick your favorite scar. I would either go like the classic shin over the eye or the fucking rope burn of the High Plains Drifter.
Dude, that is cool.
That's a scar that like, because when he pulls it down, like his bandana down in that movie, that's no fuck around time.
Yeah, that's dude. That was the most extreme rope burn. That get the Harry Potter scar from the movies that looks like the Aryan Brotherhood lightning bolts.
Yeah. Like when you show someone shit like that, like that's no fuck around time. Like I was almost strangled, man. This ain't nothing. But yeah, I'm gonna plug my show.
Yeah, plug the show. See that? I was stabbed in the throat. Anyways, so we're gonna just. All right, brother. I love your stuff, man. You guys go check him out. I'll leave the name of his podcast on this, so you guys can go check it out. It's a great show. This guy is excellent. He's a great talker, as you guys can see. This guy was destined to be on radio, especially with that awesome mustache. Really quick, I'm gonna do one of my plugs here.
Sure.
You guys can head on over to tacticonarmament.com. You guys like plate carriers, you guys like all kinds of tactical gear, lasers, sights, all that good stuff at tacticonarmament.com. So, bro, this was amazing. I'm gonna have you back because this is great.
Yeah, if you ever want to get into like the crazy shit, I'm open to anything. We'll talk about cryptids. We can talk about ghosts. I'm ready to shoot down all and sundry.
I've been getting into the whole ghosting and the cryptids, so we're gonna talk about that. So
if you ever want to dive into lolcows, let me know too, because nobody else wants to talk about them with me.
Dude, I'll talk about them with you. That would be. We kind of got into them, but I don't know too many because I'm barely like diving into it. But it's an entertaining topic, and I kind of feel bad for them too. Like
it's hard not to, but we can get into it another time. Yeah, I do appreciate you having me, though. I appreciate it utterly.
All right, guys. So stay tuned for more. And remember, guys, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not after you.